Part 1. Aris Imparo, guy from Imparo Rising. Clementine, girl from The Walking Dead. Once upon a time, in a post-apocalyptic world, Aris Imparo was wandering around the ruins of an abandoned city. He felt hopeless, as the world he once knew was long gone, and he had no one to share his thoughts with. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. He turned around to see Clementine, who was standing only a few meters away. Aris was hesitant at first. He didn't know if he could trust her or not. However, something about her made him curious. They started talking, and after a while, they both realized that they had a lot in common. Clementine had lost everything too, and she was on her own. As they walked together, Aris and Clementine discovered a lot of things about each other. They had the same goal to survive, and they promised to help each other until the end. As days passed by, they began to appreciate the little things in life, like the beauty of the sunset and the sound of a bird's chirp. They laughed together, and they shared their fears and dreams. They felt a connection that they had never felt before. One day, while they were resting by a river, Aris took a deep breath and looked at Clementine. He was lost in her crystal blue eyes, and he felt his heart beating fast. He summoned the courage to confess his love to her. Clementine smiled, and she replied that she had been feeling the same way. From that day onwards, they were no longer just two survivors working together for survival, but they were two people in a loving relationship. They supported each other emotionally and physically, and they always found ways to make each other laugh. They continued to walk and fight for survival, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. In the end, their love for each other gave them the strength they needed to overcome all the obstacles that came their way. They proved that even in a world without hope, love and companionship could make life worth living. Aris and Clementine were a testament to the power of love, and their love story will always be remembered as a shining example of what can be achieved when people come together. Part 2. Aris Imparo, from Imparo Rising. Clementine, from The Walking Dead. Aris Imparo and Clementine had fallen in love in the midst of the apocalypse. They had found each other in a world where everyone seemed to be fighting for survival, and they had formed a strong bond that kept them going. They had created a makeshift home together, scavenging for food and supplies, and relying on each other for support and comfort. One day, as they were out looking for supplies, they were ambushed by a group of bandits. Aris tried to protect Clementine, but there were too many of them, and they were outnumbered. The bandits took everything they had, including their weapons and their home, leaving them with nothing. Aris and Clementine were devastated. Not only had they lost everything they had worked so hard for, but they had lost each other. They had been separated during the attack, and despite Aris's efforts to find her, Clementine was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and Aris searched for Clementine tirelessly, hoping that she was still alive. He visited all the places they had been to together, hoping that she would be there waiting for him. But there was no sign of her, and Aris's heart was breaking. One day, as he was sitting by a fire, he heard a sound that made his heart skip a beat. It was Clementine's voice, faint and distant, but unmistakable. He ran towards the sound, his heart pounding, and finally saw her. Clementine was lying on the ground, injured and barely conscious. Aris rushed to her side, tears streaming down his face, and held her hand. He knew that her injuries were too severe, and that she wouldn't make it. Clementine looked up at him with her bright green eyes, and whispered that she loved him. Aris held her close, feeling her slip away from him. He cried for her, for their lost love, for the unfairness of it all. He knew that he would never forget her, and that she would always be a part of him. Aris buried Clementine with honor, and then walked away, alone once again. His heart was heavy with grief, but he knew that he had to keep moving forward. He had to survive, for her, for himself, and for anyone else who might need his help. Aris was alone in the world once again, but he was determined to keep going, to keep fighting, and to keep the memory of Clementine alive in his heart. He would never forget her, and he would always love her. Part 3. Aris Imparo and Sor, from Imparo Rising. Clementine, from The Walking Dead. After the tragic loss of his beloved Clementine, Aris Imparo found himself all alone in the harsh and unforgiving world of the zombie apocalypse. His heart ached with grief, and he felt as though he would never find love again. But then one day, as he was scavenging through an abandoned convenience store, he met a young woman named Sor. She was tough and independent, with piercing blue eyes and a fierce determination that matched Aris's own. At first, Aris was hesitant to open up to Sor, still plagued by the memories of his lost love. But as they spent more time together, he found himself drawn to her strength and resilience. He learned that Sor had lost her entire family to the outbreak, and had been surviving on her own ever since. Hearing her story made Aris realize that he wasn't alone in his struggles, and that there were others out there who also knew the pain of loss and loneliness. As Aris and Sor grew closer, they shared stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, and their fears of the present. They fought off hordes of walkers together, shared meals by the fire, and held each other close in moments of despair. But even as their love grew, Aris couldn't help but feel guilty about moving on from Clementine. He wondered if he was betraying her memory by falling for another woman. One day, as they were taking a break from their travels, Sor looked at Aris with concern in her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. Aris hesitated, unsure of how to explain his feelings. But Sor took his hand and said, "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm here for you." With tears in his eyes, Aris finally opened up about Clementine, and how he still felt guilty about loving someone else. To his surprise, Sor listened with empathy and understanding. "I know you loved her," she said softly. "But you can love more than one person in this life. And I know she would want you to be happy, even if it's not with her." Hearing Sor's words brought a wave of relief and comfort to Aris. He realized that he didn't have to feel guilty about moving on, that he could honor Clementine's memory while still finding happiness with another. And so, Aris and Sor continued their journey through the zombie-infested world, hand in hand, heart in heart. They faced countless challenges and dangers, but together they found the strength to keep fighting, to keep surviving, and to keep loving. Aris Imparo and Sor, from Imparo Rising. Part 4. It was supposed to be just another day in the zombie apocalypse for Aris Imparo and Sor, a day filled with danger and uncertainty but also with the hope of survival and the promise of each other's love. But what they got was a day that would forever haunt them, a day they would never forget. It started when they were ambushed by a group of walkers while scavenging for supplies in a run-down mall. Aris had underestimated the numbers and the ferocity of the undead, and Sor wasn't fast enough to evade them. They were soon surrounded, and the only way out was through. They fought together, with all the weapons they had, but it was a losing battle. Aris had been bitten on the arm, and Sor had an open wound on her leg. They knew they had to leave if they wanted to survive. With no other option, they ran towards the only exit they could find, but it was blocked by an army of walkers. They were trapped. Aris felt a surge of fear and despair, but he knew he had to keep Sor safe. He grabbed her hand and they made a break for another exit on the other side of the mall. But as they approached the exit, they saw that it was blocked by a wall of bricks and rubble. They were trapped. The walkers were getting closer and closer, their moans growing louder and more frantic. They looked at each other, and Aris knew what he had to do. He told Sor to climb on his back, and he would try to boost her up to the top of the wall. She hesitated for a moment, but she knew it was their only chance. Aris lifted Sor up with all his strength, and she grabbed onto the edge of the wall. But as he pushed her up, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his side. One of the walkers had gotten too close and had bitten through his shirt. Sor screamed in terror as she watched Aris fall to the ground, writhing in agony. She couldn't help him, as the walkers were already surrounding her. She saw Aris's face as he breathed his last, and she knew she had lost the love of her life. Sor fought on, determined to avenge Aris and to survive against all odds. But the memory of that horrible day haunted her forever, reminding her of the cruelty and randomness of the world they lived in. Part 5. Aris Imparo and Sor, stop they are from Imparo Rising. How dumb are you? Wait, I'm the dumb one. April, unknown. Sor's descent was nerve-wracking, every bone in her body shaking with fear as she carefully climbed down the broken rooftop ladder from which Aris had once boosted her up. Once on the street, Sor ducked behind a nearby car, unwilling to chance confrontation with the walkers lurking on every corner of the mall entrance. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had a mission to complete, to keep moving forward, and to survive. She looked up and down the street and saw no signs of movement, other than the shuffling of the walkers. A few cars sat abandoned or overturned, and some of the store windows had been smashed, but for the most part, everything was still. Sor had never felt so alone in her life, but she knew she had to be brave, to have courage if she hoped to stay alive. Taking another deep breath, she stepped out from behind the car and made her way towards the mall in trance, her senses heightened as she kept an eye out for walkers. The entrance was a mess of broken glass, rubble, and debris, but fortunately, there were no walkers lurking inside. Sor rushed through the mall, taking quick, cautious strides while keeping her eyes peeled for any sign of danger. It seemed that the mall had been completely abandoned, with all the stores shut and empty. She found herself in disbelief as she walked through stores like Hot Topic, Journeys, and Spencer's that were always filled with people, merchandise, and noise. It was eerily quiet now. She knew she needed to find food, water, and a weapon. She searched store after store until finally coming across a sporting goods store. There she found some canned food and a sturdy metal bat with a good grip, which she took for self-defense. As Sor was about to leave the store, she heard a scream. It was a young girl, no older than 10, surrounded by walkers at the other end of the mall. She was cornered and had no way out. Sor knew she had to act fast. Without hesitation, she rushed to the girl's side, slammed her bat against a walker's skull, and swung it against another, using her newfound weapon to battle the undead. With sheer adrenaline, Sor fought off the horde, saving the young girl and herself from being torn apart. The girl's name was April, and Sor could only imagine what this little girl had gone through. But, for the first time since Aris Imparo's death, Sor felt hope. Together, Sor and April journeyed through the land of the undead, facing unimaginable horrors, but giving each other strength and support. Though there was still a long, terrifying road ahead of them, their newfound partnership gave them hope for survival and the ability to carry on living. To honor Aris's sacrifice and his part in getting Sor to safety, they made it their mission to help others and fight off the living dead together.